All right, let's get started and hopefully we'll have a couple more joining. If not, like I said, I'm going to try my best to record. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. For anybody that is new, my name is Emily Zartman Elliott, and I am the Assistant Program Coordinator for STARS. And joining me tonight is Jennifer LaPiana, and she's our STARS Program Coordinator.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
So Jen and I are going to tackle one of, I would say, the more informative topics, and I think a topic that can be very overwhelming and a bit confusing for families, and that is the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan. And in tandem with that, we're going to talk about quarterly reports because those are actually reports that are written by your child's team regarding their direct progress towards their goals that are written into their IEP. So we are going to get started. I'm going to share my screen. Jen, if you cannot hear me as I share, please let me know. All right. All right. So we are going to get started with our November workshop.
All set, Em.
Great. And I am going to try to make this a little bigger here. Oops. Let's see if I can. There we go. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk about breaking down an IEP, and we're also going to talk about quarterly reports. So Jen is actually going to take the lead on quarterlies. So let's talk about an IEP. Well, first of all, what is it? It is a individualized education plan. So IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. This is a written statement of the programs and services to directly meet the individual needs of a preschool student with a disability. This plan is developed at the student's meeting with the Committee on Preschool Special Education. So that's where you hear that term CPSC. When a child transitions to preschool age or comes in to special education as a preschooler, they are part of the CPSC team. That team is directly linked to whatever school district your child resides in. So if you are somebody that lives in Webster, when you have a 3-year-old that is preschool aged with, a disability and is receiving services, then Webster School District is your CPSC team. And that committee, in addition to, the child's parents, maybe a regular ed teacher if provided, a special ed teacher if provided, the CPSC chair, and really any other individuals that would have, knowledge of the child. So this team meets, and what they do is they create this individualized education plan. So this plan that is very unique to the child. So every integrated and special class child attending STARS has an IEP. On occasion, our community students may have an IEP due to a related service. So for those of you that have not been on in the past, the difference really between an integrated special class child and a community-based child is our integrated and special class students come in. They are usually referred to us through, early intervention or again, preschool age committee, and they qualify to receive special education services in a classroom setting. So that's very, very specific. They have to be deemed eligible to receive those services to be a integrated or special class child. If a student is coming to us as a community student, usually we kind of coin that term with like a neurotypical student and or a PK student, then They most likely will not have services, but sometimes they might come in with a related service. So they might, have a little bit of a delay, maybe with speech or with OT. And so, per the evaluations, they will receive those services if STARS has the availability. Our providers right at program, or if we don't, most likely a home provider. So during the enrollment process, when we bring kids in and we enroll them, the child's school district will give STARS a finalized version of an IEP. So for anybody that's on here, it's like, oh, Emily, we toured with you. We heard your spiel. Typically in my spiel when I tour children is, okay, you came on the tour. Because the district is responsible for your child and they hold and create their IEP, the district then has to essentially give us access to the document and put our name on the document as the provider, and then we adopt that. So without that finalized IEP saying Liberty Post STARS Preschool is the provider, the child is not yet enrolled. So that's a big thing. Is this document? It belongs to the school district. It's housed with the school district. But then we adopt the program while they're in preschool. And then we essentially, kind of give it back to the school district once they transition to kindergarten, if they still remain eligible. So again, once the school district has given STARS access to the child's IEP, STARS becomes responsible for the child's program. So again, who creates the IEP? We covered this a little bit on the last slide. This is really created by the child's school district CPSE chair. Parents or guardians of the child, input from current service providers, anyone that sat on the evaluation team or supported with the child's evaluation. Typically, there is a county representative. So if you reside in Monroe County, it's a rep from Monroe County. Maybe if you reside in Ontario County, it could be a rep from Ontario County. And really any other individual with knowledge and consent of the child's developmental needs. So this really is a collaborative document. So let's talk a little bit about developing this and the process for that. So the IEP, again, is a strategic planning document that really identifies a student's unique needs and really talks about how the school will strategically address those needs. So this is totally a student-centered, individualized process. There is no two IEPs that look the same. Information from the child's family, evaluators, teachers, related service. When I say related service, I'm referring to, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and really anyone else, again, with that knowledge of the child is really, really important in the creation of this plan. We want the people that have the best information, the most up-to-date information, helping to determine a really meaningful document to drive instruction and support the child. So all members of the committee share the responsibility to contribute meaningful information in the development of the IEP and to make recommendations that are based on what we call the student's present levels of performance. So we'll get to that on the next slide. And it's really in consideration with the student's strength, needs, interests, preferences, and any concerns of the parents for the education of their child. So this document can be really big. And like I said, it can be really overwhelming, but the big thing is that we're hitting on those things. We're hitting on the student's strengths. We're also hitting on the needs. We're hitting on the interests of the students, the preferences, because then when we're given that document and we're adapting that document, we really have the best information about how that student is going to be successful and learn and thrive in our setting. So the IEP must be developed in such a way that it is a useful document that guides instruction and really provides a tool to measure progress. So again, at the bottom of this document, there are goals, right, that are created for every discipline, for every child's IEP. And we really want the IEP to be able to support driving the actual instruction that happens in the classroom and happens in therapy to work towards the progress of those goals. All staff with the responsibility to implement a student's IEP must be specifically informed of their responsibilities and be provided a copy of the student's IEP. So we really take care of this on our end when we get access to the finalized IEP. We make sure then that team is created for the child and that everybody has access to that information. Systems of progress monitoring of the student's progress toward an annual goals must be established and consistently implemented. So this really is a STARS, where STARS develops certain data tracking techniques for monitoring this progress. And then, the last bullet is from those data tracking techniques and that monitoring of progress, those formative assessments, which are really kind of informal assessments that happen throughout the entire year. We then take that and have the responsibility to inform, parents and guardians regularly of their child's progress. And Jen is going to touch in a little bit about, one of the biggest ways that we kind of inform parents and guardians of this progress. So if you have your child's IEP in front of you, that's amazing. If not, that's totally fine. But you might look at this cover page and say, oh, this looks familiar. So this is a classic cover page student information page. Almost every single IEP, probably every single IEP that I've seen, their information cover page looks just like this. So some of the biggest differences are going to be kid to kid are the district. So at the top, you'll see it's a committee on preschool special education. So it's a preschool IEP because it says it at the top. It says the district. And then from there, it's the student information summary. So these cover pages are all set up the same and then are unique to the specific student. So you have all of your demographics. You might have special alerts. So in this section, the special alerts, you could have anything like an allergy to maybe a diagnosis, whatever, again, the family, the providers, the district, and that advocacy team deemed to be a special alert would potentially go in that section. And then that next part is really the meeting information. So it gives you the date of the meeting and really what is the reason. So for this particular child, the reason for this meeting was it was a reevaluation and also an annual review. It tells you the participants, and then it gives you just maybe like a snippet or a comment that might be relevant to the meeting. Under that is any recommended classifications and placement information. So on here, it again just tells you that the committee is preschool. The decision for a meeting like this was because this child was a preschooler that was classified with a disability. And then it gives the projected start date of an IEP and end date of the IEP. So that's really important for programs, right? Because we really can't start delivering service before that start date, and we should not be delivering service after that end date. So that's going to be something that's really important to keep an eye on to make sure that the service is delivered within that time frame. And then the section below that is the summary of related services and the special education program that this particular child qualified for. So you'll see that this particular child qualified for a special class 1012. There's the date of the IEP, start to finish. There is the duration, how many times a week for how many hours, the location of service, and who is providing that. So then as you go down, you can kind of see that, the hierarchy is the classroom, followed by if they receive speech, followed by if they receive occupational therapy, followed by if they receive physical therapy. And sometimes our kiddos could receive things like music or maybe AT. Those would also be on there. And then same thing as you go left to right, the start date and end date, the frequency and duration, the location that service is being delivered. So you'll see for speech, there is a line where, 2 times a week it's in the therapy room, and then 1 time a week it's in the classroom, and then who is providing that service, which is Liberty Post, STARS, that's us. Okay, so we kind of talked a little bit on the previous slide about the components of the IEP. So, the really important, beginning component of an IEP after that demographics are the present levels of academic and functional performance. Okay, so what's going to come first really is those evaluations. So, an appropriate program for a student with a disability begins with an IEP that really reflects the results of the student's individual evaluation and describes the need of the student to be addressed through the provision of special education services, including, again, the child's strengths, their interests, preferences, and any concerns of the parents. So the present levels of performance section really identifies the area of unique needs related to the student's disability and what we refer to as the current level of functioning. So when we talk about some of those domains, which we'll get to, we really look at the current level of where the child is functioning in those domains. So is it a mild delay? Is it a moderate delay? Is it a severe delay? Including, again, strengths of the students related to those areas. So we're not only talking about the needs, but we're talking about the strengths in those given domains as well, because that's really what's going to drive instruction. So this really is the foundation on which the committee builds and identifies the most appropriate goals and services to address the student's individual needs. So you'll see right here in this first section, these are all the evaluation results for this particular student and the dates in which those evaluations took place. And then below that are the test results. So you can see, that for fine motor, this child, had a standard score of 70, which again, when we go back to that current level of functioning, that results in a severe delay. So we obviously have considerations when identifying present levels of performance. One of those big considerations are the results of the student's most recent individual evaluation. So most recent is key. We're really looking for something. What do you think, Jen? Within the last year or so is probably the most relevant.
Yes.
Is it 3 years now that we're really looking for any updated testing?
Yeah, 3 years is an automatic reevaluation. But sometimes, depending on the school district, they will ask just for some updated test scores. A lot of times it's before the students transition to kindergarten, but a reeval is usually every 3-year process.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
Another consideration, again, when identifying present levels of performance would be student strength. The third one really doesn't pertain to preschool age, but when you're thinking about school age, one of the considerations could be the student's results on any state or district-wide assessment. Parent and guardian concerns for really enhancing the education of their child, right? You guys know your kids best. Special factors related to the student's disability or need, such as a student's needs in an area of maybe behavior, of communication, maybe English as a second language, assistive tech, etc. How the student's developmental delay affects involvement in participating in age-appropriate activities, and the results of age-appropriate transition assessment and the student's strengths, preference, and interests as they relate to transition from school to post-school activities. So to me, really, this is the whole student, the whole child. So when we look at present levels of performance, I kind of talked a little bit about, we look at it through the domains. So the academic achievement, functional performance, and learning characteristics. We're really looking at it through the student's current levels of knowledge and development in the following areas: daily living, level of intellectual functioning. So this really is like your general intelligence, your attention and memory, your ability to problem solve, your language functioning, that adaptive behavior, So how one makes, judgments and decisions, copes with natural and social demands of their environment, expected rate of progress in acquiring skills and information, which really is the pace in which a student learns and retains new information or skills. We look at the social development. So this is the relationship with peers and adults, how the child feels about themselves, the understanding about feelings and emotions of the self, social adjustments to school and community environment. Those are just a couple under social. The physical development. So this is the motor and sensory. So when we talk motor, we talk, growth motor, those big motor movements, body movements. We talk about fine motor. Those are those small, body movements. Sensory, again, when we talk about sensory, think about all those senses, right? Are our kids seeking sensory input? Do our kids have aversions to sensory input? Do they tend to get overstimulated, understimulated? Our sensory system is huge in, determining the needs of ourselves and our kids. Health, vitality, and physical skills or limitations that pertain to the learning process. And then the management needs, which we'll discuss on the next page. So when we look at management needs, this is actually a section in every single IEP. These really are, the management needs mean that the nature and degree to which the following are required to enable the student to benefit from instruction. So these really are the supports that your child needs to be successful within the classroom setting, within the therapy setting, within the school setting. So these look like environmental modifications, right? This could be consistency and routine, maybe limited visual auditory distractions, adaptive furniture. This could look like more human resources, so assistance in locating classes, following schedules, and as you get up into that school age, assistance in note taking, assistance with, modifications or adjustments to material resources. So for us, some examples would be, hand over hand assistance, right? So just giving maybe a verbal prompt, which would be, Jimmy, sit down in your chair. The verbal prompt is not enough for Jimmy. So a management need might be, you are going over, you're taking Jimmy's hand, you're maybe putting your other hand on Jimmy's shoulder and you're guiding him over to his chair. You're maybe showing him a visual cue of the chair and helping him sit down. That's that hand over hand assist, right? That's a management need that is specific to supporting Jimmy's needs and driving the instruction for him to be successful. Sometimes this looks like maybe an oral motor cue or something that helps stimulate in terms of that oral motor sensation. It could be visual prompts, it could be physical prompts, modeling, redirection. You'll see in a ton of our classrooms, hopefully the next time you'll be into, visit, is adaptive seating, tons of adaptive seating. So, the expectation might be that, not every kid can sit, in a regular chair, right? So are we bringing in a rocking chair? Are we bringing in a exercise ball? Are we bringing in some type of a scoop chair? We are going to provide a management need that's going to best support that child. Again, that's with knowing what those present levels of performance is, what their strengths are, what their interests are, what supports their sensory, what supports their social development. So it's having all of that knowledge to then be able to provide them with the best management needs possible to be successful in their environment. So again, this section is going to look very unique to your child. The next section in the IEP is student needs relating to special factors. So this specific area of the IEP, tends to, unless your child, kind of falls under a special factor category, can get looked over, pretty quickly. So I will just kind of touch on, what each of these sections mean. So Part of this would be if your child receives assistive technology and has a device or service. So assistive technology doesn't just mean that your child, you know, uses an iPad and likes to play on the iPad or might use the iPad to maybe communicate here or there. Assistive technology is a service that comes through an evaluation process. Your child has to be evaluated to be deemed eligible, having the need and or with the finding that using an assistive tech device is actually beneficial for their communication. Okay, so this comes with an evaluation. It comes with an extra line added onto the IEP that this is a service that's being delivered. So this is not going to be a box that is checked for every single student. It really is going to be a box that is checked for students that receive this additional service. Same thing with a behavior intervention plan. This is only specific to students that have behavior that really significantly impedes their learning. A BIP, behavior intervention plan, might be added per the team and the district's recommendation. So really that comes after what we refer to as an FBA. So that's a functional behavior analysis. So again, it doesn't just get put into place because a child's having a really tough time and they might be, exhibiting some new behaviors or some old behaviors or some frequent behaviors. It comes with a lot of data collection, a lot of strategies that are being implemented. It comes with, a lot of, kind of that upfront support, that tracking, and then from there, the team can request to, complete something that is called an FBA, functional behavior analysis. And from there, that then goes again back to the school district for a meeting, and this would be an additional line. Behavior intervention plan would be an additional line that's added to the IEP. And right here is where you would note that the behavior intervention plan exists. Another part of this section is language needs of the student. So this really falls with limited English proficiency, such as, needs, that are relevant to the student's IEP. So sometimes this could be, if English is a second language within the house, and, this really impacts the child's ability to, learn in their preschool program. A visual impairment and or a student that uses a device or a service who is deaf or hard of hearing. So those 5 things would really fall under those special factors. They are not going to be under everybody's IEP, and you most likely know if your child's IEP has one of these on it. Okay, so then let's talk about measurable annual goals, which is going to lead us into the quarterlies. So again, we really are creating these IEPs strong and really determining those present levels of performance and the individual needs, because we are working towards individual goals. So individual need determinations must provide the basis for a student's written annual goal. The IEP must list measurable annual goals consistent with, again, the student's needs and abilities to be followed during the period in which the IEP will be in effect. So typically, right, for us, when we enroll a child, our start date is the beginning of September and the end date is the end of June. So within the September to June timeframe, those goals are what our teachers and our therapists are using to drive instruction. And we're doing that through a way of measuring them on a consistent basis to make sure that we are really, targeting them and providing the best instruction that is going to help support the student, in working towards those, okay? So for each annual goal, the IEP must indicate the following. The evaluative criteria. So this is the measure used to determine if the goal has been achieved. The evaluation procedure. So this is how progress will be measured and scheduled. So when progress will be measured to be used to measure the student's progress towards meeting the annual goal. So I'm going to give you an example on the next slide. So the IEP must include a description of the short-term instructional objectives and or benchmarks that are measurable intermediate steps between the student's present level of performance and the measurable annual goal. So this first one right here is a speech and language goal. Under that speech and language title, you'll see the overall goal. So that's the big goal, right? So-and-so will use at least 5 single words via total communication approach to participate and engage with adults across activities given maximum adult support by June 2024. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot of information in one goal. So that's the overall goal that your child is working towards in speech from September to June. Underneath that are those benchmarks. Those are those short-term instructional objectives and benchmarks that are really going to be driving the overall goal. And then we have, going from left to right, the annual goal and the objectives, the criteria. So again, the measure to determine if the goal has been achieved. So for this specific speech goal, the speech therapist is going to be using the criteria to measure this 80% accuracy over 2 weeks. So when they're taking their data and they're working on these objectives and these goals, their data is going to include, right, at 100% trials, we're working towards 80% is being achieved. Okay. And the method in which they're going to do this is structured observations of targeted behavior. So they're going to have formal observations of the student during sessions in which they're observing, right, their instruction that is geared towards this goal. And then that's where they're going to take their data. And then when will progress be measured is monthly. So they're doing this on a monthly basis. Okay. You can kind of see below that would be a social emotional goal, and that would be the responsibility of the special education teacher. So same thing, you have your overarching goal. Underneath that, you have your objectives, and then from left to right, you have your criteria, your method, and the schedule. So annual goals are statements that identify what knowledge, skills, and or behaviors a student is expected to be able to demonstrate within the year during which the IEP will be in effect. So again, for STARS, September to June. The IEP must list measurable annual goals consistent with the student's needs and abilities as identified in the present levels of performance. So I'm going to be completely transparent. Sometimes goals are written and we get IEPs and, we get a kid in here for 2 or 3 months and we say, you know what? This goal really is not appropriate, right? We don't feel within a calendar year that it's obtainable, or maybe we say, you know what, we think that this student really, we're already seeing that they're doing this 75, 80% of the time. So let's really extend that goal and, make it a little bit more, realistic to the child's, again, needs and the child's, ability to reach that goal by June. Not every child is going to reach their goals by June, and that's okay. Everybody learns at their own pace. So please, 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 if you got nothing else out of tonight, it is okay if the goals are not reached by June. Okay. These are just benchmarks. These are things that we're working towards, right? They are those within that developmental trajectory of, by kindergarten, we're really looking for our kids to be able to do X, Y, and Z within those domains. That's what we're working towards. But everybody is on a different trajectory, and that is okay. When they transition to kindergarten, or if they come back to us next year, we're going to take those goals. And if they weren't achieved, that's all right. We're going to rewrite them. And we're going to then continue on next year to work towards them again. Or we're going to transition to kindergarten. We're going to write some new goals, right? That are maybe have similar verbiage, but are a little bit different. And your child's going to continue to work towards those in kindergarten. So it's okay if they're not achieved. There's something that we're working towards. Okay. we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to kind of have those goals in mind. And Jen is really going to talk about how we track that progress and then how we get that information to you.
Yeah, thanks, Em. So quarterly IEP progress updates occur 3 to 4 times a year. It depends really on your school district. Most of the counties that we work with and most of the districts will do them 4 times a year, once in November, January, April, and June. Some of our districts that sit in Wayne County, Wayne Central specifically, and I believe Marion, they only have them 3 times a year in December, March, and June. So that being said, we just closed Q1, meaning that every provider that works with your child, the classroom teacher, speech, OT, PT, or music, depending on what they receive, they are going into a program that is linked to your child's school district. They are going to make a comment on the progress toward each goal over this first quarter. Once that quarter closes, the updates automatically get sent to your school district so they can see how your child's progressing. And we are showing that we are working toward these goals and in the progress that your child is making. Additionally, you should be receiving a copy via email of that progress report. We can also send it home in the backpack if that's easier. I will be posting to Dojo along, maybe Emily will do it with this for me, that Q1 is now closed. And if you haven't received your copy, to please let your site manager know at your building, and we will be happy to either email it to you or send it to you via the backpack. So perfect timing. Q1 is just finishing up and all of the providers have given their updates on this quarter. If you could go to the next slide, I believe it breaks down what you'll see. So exactly here. So here's a sample goal. A child will, following specific sensory input, will improve grasping patterns and bilateral coordination skills. This is an OT goal. So you will see that there's going to be what we call these progress indicators, and there's a kind of a legend that goes along with it. So in the first box for the first quarter, that provider is going to say the student has achieved this, maybe they're progressing satisfactorily, gradually, and consistently. Maybe they haven't achieved it. Maybe it hasn't been introduced yet. Or they might say something like as simple as SC, see the comments, and they're going to write a nice update about where your child is and how they're progressing towards these things, what they're seeing them work on, this level of support that they might be needing, and then maybe the areas that they're really still going to be focusing on if they haven't achieved it yet. Then down below, those benchmarks Emily was talking about, where it's kind of broken down into smaller pieces, there's another legend. They've either achieved it, that hasn't been introduced, it hasn't been achieved, or again, see comments. So in that first box for this first quarter, they will again make some sort of legend mark there, and you will get all of that home nice and neat, each goal, each objective, each discipline on that progress report. So that all comes with you. There should be something there so that you're able to understand exactly what the shortened abbreviations mean, and then a nice comment by your provider, also signed by them as well. So if you did have questions about it or concerns, you would know specifically who to go to via Class Dojo or give the site a call to follow up if you had concerns or questions about that. Also, what happens around this time of the year, and it was actually just a little bit ago, we have IEP review requests that we put in as a team. So what we're doing during those first 30 days that your students are in program with us, specifically for students that are brand new to us, but also for some of our returners, because some of them have made progress since last year, right? So we might need to change something that was indicated on their IEP. So what we're doing is we're just always reviewing that IEP, making sure that the level of service that they're receiving is appropriate. As Emily said, making sure those goals are appropriate, and really deciding, do we need to make any changes to this IEP? In order to do that, we have to reach out to you as the family. We would, the teacher, the provider, whoever's thinking about making one of those changes, would reach out to you, because a change can never be made without your consent and without the district knowing about it. So some examples of changes that providers might ask to make is they might ask to either increase a service or decrease a service. So for example, PT might be delivered 2 times a week, but the provider really feels like that they need 3. They would write up a justification, and then with your permission, we would submit it to the school district. Another one would be individual services to group services. So for example, an individual service means that the student is only seen by themselves to receive their speech therapy. But sometimes we want students to be in a group because we notice in the classroom that they're really relating to their peers. It's a nice way to work on some of their pragmatic language and that those social skills and turn taking. So they may say to you, would it be okay if we change the individual sessions to groups so that I can group your child with somebody else who's working on similar skills? And sometimes we know some students learn better from their peers, right? So it's a motivator for them. So they might ask you for something like that. And then again, as Emily was saying, modifying a goal to make it either more attainable or maybe adding in some objectives that weren't there, but that they're really trying to target with your child because they feel like it's an area that they want to see that growth and improvement in. So basically what happens is once that we get the okay from you, all of that paperwork goes to the school district. And then they really determine, is it a change that really requires a meeting? A lot of times if we're going to remove a service from an IEP, or if we're asking for like an increase, they'll probably have a meeting. And sometimes they'll do it with just a consent paperwork where you just sign off saying, yes, I agree to that. But either way, you have to basically give your consent to the changes on the IEP prior to it ever being changed and prior to us being able to deliver the service in that way. And then really, the caveat here is that all of those requests are really subject to the committee approval. So your home school district, who kind of holds your IEP, they're the ones who have to say, yes, we agree with this, or no, we'd like more information, or whatever it might be. We're usually pretty successful with these because, we're asking for things that are really appropriate for your individual child and what their needs are. So once that approval is obtained and confirmed, whether it's a meeting or just a consent form, they then send the IEPs to us with those changes. Typically, they'll send you an updated one as well, just so that you know what those changes were. And then we start fulfilling the IEP based on that. So again, if the child was only receiving 2 physical therapy sessions a week and they approve 3 physical therapy sessions a week, the provider, as soon as the start date on the IEP reflected when they're able to do that, they would then increase that session by 1 for that week. So again, nothing can be done until it's requested to the district and approved by you guys. And then along with that, what goes hand in hand are reevaluation requests. So again, our teachers and providers are really always informally monitoring students within that first 30 days of our program. And they're really looking for some of those indicators, those developmental checklists that are saying or potentially showing that, maybe your child doesn't get occupational services right now, but we're noticing that maybe there are some fine motor things or that they are really seeking out some sensory things in the classroom. They're running or crashing or needing to jump a lot, things like that. We might go to you and say, here are some things that we're seeing in the classroom. We would really like to just have those things more formally evaluated. And then obviously, if you're in approval, it's the same type of process where we would have to submit something to your school district. So, this is really for a service that your child doesn't already receive. And as Emily said, at our program, we provide speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, music therapy, or assistive technology services. So again, before anything goes to the school district making this request, it can't go any further than you. So our providers would be in touch with you to say, these are the things we're seeing. We're wondering if you're okay with us requesting this reevaluation, just to determine if there's another service that's warranted on your child's IEP. So if you give us the okay to do that, it's similar to the other process where we submit the paperwork to the school district. They would then get consent from you to actually have the evaluation occur. They'll often ask you what agency. A lot of times folks will pick us, which is great. We'll complete the evaluation, and then there's always a meeting after a reevaluation is done with the district. So, there's a timeline. Once the consent comes in, it's about 30 days. We have to complete it, and then get that meeting in. And then really the committee is going to come back. They're going to review the results of that evaluation, and then they're going to determine whether or not an addition of service is warranted. Again, final determination is by the committee, and you as the parent and family are all a part of that meeting and in those decisions as well. And nothing would be added to your child's IEP without the approval of them. And then again, they're going to send us that new updated IEP before we can actually start services with your child. There, we might request, some others during, especially we're coming up on annual review season. I'm just going to have a nice presentation about what that means and looks like. So we might request reevaluations at other times throughout the year. It really just depends on how we see your child functioning. And if we determine along the way that there might be some areas that we're starting to notice that there could be more support warranted. All right.
Stop sharing and recording. I'm going to try. Let's see.